there, chipmunks! Welcome to the AMP Cycling Ride Review Series. I'm your host, Angry Chipmunk, and today we're in the US state of Arizona taking on the Grand Canyon. This route is available on Rouvy, so let's get right to it. This is a moderate length route at almost 33 kilometers long, with a moderate amount of elevation gain at 340 meters. The whole route averages just 1% and peaks at 8%. There are no Strava segments included on Rouvy, and surprisingly, none on Strava either. This seems pretty odd to me, as surely people will ride out there to have a quick squiz. There are two main hills in this route, with a lot of smaller hills scattered throughout. As evidenced by the low elevation gain, there won't be anything too extreme here. The climbs are really just hills of increased substance. The first main hill you'll encounter is at the 12-kilometer mark. It's about 4 kilometers long, with 131 meters of elevation gain, peaking at the route max of 8%. Some quick gradient math suggests it averages 3.2%. The steepest part with the max gradient comes about 1 kilometer into the climb. There's a nice bit of moderate downhill and flat before getting there, so you can use some of your momentum to help push up the first bit. After the max gradient, it's really quite mellow for the rest of the way, mainly in the 2 to 4% range, with a second peak at about 7%. The lead up to this hill, and most of what follows it, is really only going to see around 5 to 6%. So while this hill really isn't that steep, the surrounds are far mellower. The second climb is at about the 28.5 kilometer mark, is around 1 kilometer long with 40 meters of elevation gain, peaking at 6%. The gradient math suggests it averages 4%. Again, you've got a nice downhill heading into this climb, so to be sure to use the terrain to your advantage. Otherwise, being so short, it is a good one to push up pretty hard to try for some max watts. The terrain to the end has a few small hills, but they are very mild. It's a good one to either push hard to the finish or just sit back and cruise on in. For this ride, you'll want to partially warm up for your intended effort. I would say 5 minutes at minimum anyway, but if you're looking to push this one pretty hard, then go for more. Your cooldown should also reflect the effort you've put in. It's a good one to push pretty hard on, but definitely also suitable for taking it easy. Again, 5 minutes cooldown at least. And as always, I recommend pre-fueling your rides, including plenty of protein with that. This one isn't so difficult that this is a must, but still a good idea. If you can't pre-fuel, have around 15 grams right at the start of the ride. This should see you good for most to all of the ride, unless you've been pushing pretty hard. If you need to follow up with more food, have another 10 grams or so around midway. The whole route is so mellow, you don't need to worry about where to eat, but that also means you shouldn't really need to eat too much either. A post-ride protein may not be necessary for a moderate effort, but a magnesium supplement is always helpful. The view on this one is interesting. I naturally expected to see some pretty epic views of the canyon, but in reality, you see none of it at all. The camera van does go into a couple of viewing spot car parks, but it just drives through them. There are a few panorama shots, but it's still mostly just the car park. And if you're moving pretty quickly, they're done and dusted before you even notice. What you do see is a 2-lane highway surrounded by forest and scrub on either side. It's not a terrible view, and it actually reminds me a lot of Australia, but it does get a bit monotonous. For this ride, a moderate effort took me just over 1 hour to complete on 100% difficulty emulation. With not needing too much of a warm-up or cooldown, I would say to budget anywhere from 1 hour to 1 hour 45 for it. It can be suitable for a moderate time restriction if you're pretty fast. It's also not a very complex route, so definitely suitable to stop midway and pick up again later. Overall, this is a moderate route. Moderate distance, moderate elevation, moderate time needed, moderate view. It's not the most exciting route out there, but it is suitable for almost every level of rider. The hills are not very steep, and while most of the elevation is in the first half, it's still pretty evenly spread out. It can be suitable route for pushing distance and elevation goals. If you're a more experienced rider, this one can be a good one to sandwich around bigger and tougher routes when you just need something to keep your legs spinning. I wouldn't put it in my ride queue for the views, but it's definitely a good one to keep in mind for the other reasons mentioned. For this route, I give a 5 out of 5. The route itself is pretty good. Nice location with easygoing terrain. For the climbs, 1 out of 5 and 0.5 out of 5. Neither are really that challenging. They are best suited to use as a training tool for newer riders, and using the terrain to your advantage makes them even easier. For the view, 3.5 out of 5. It isn't a terrible view, but it is really lacking for not having any shots of the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's not called that small ditch out in the back of your house, so I don't really hate the view, but I would have really liked to see the large ditch. Part of why I like Rouvy is getting to see all these kinds of things in a real way, so it was a bit of a letdown. Overall, 4 out of 5. Views notwithstanding, this is still a good ride for the various reasons mentioned. It's a great one to have on standby for whatever reason you might need it. Well, that's it for this review, so thanks for watching, Chipmunks. Please let me know what you think of the Grand Canyon route when you complete it. I'll leave you to finish the rest of the ride, and I'll see you next week for another review. Until then, ride on, Chipmunks, ride on.